So you know that feeling, right? When you're learning English, you get to this point. You can understand almost everything. You can express complex ideas, maybe even, crack a few jokes.
You feel like you're almost there.
Exactly. You're right there on the edge of real fluency. But it feels like there's this invisible barrier.
Yeah, like a final hurdle that's surprisingly tough.
This final stretch that just feels so much harder than maybe it should. And it's not about like basic grammar anymore.
No, not usually at C1, no.
Or just needing more words. So what is the real holdup? What's going on?
Well, it's fascinating, especially this advanced C1 level. How much of that final push, it really seems to come down to something we often overlook.
Okay.
Our mindset.
Yeah.
It stops being just about accumulating knowledge.
We're the facts and rules.
And becomes much more about how you actually approach challenges, setbacks, even how you see your own perceived limits.
Yes, exactly. And that's precisely what we want to dive into today.
Feels good.
We've been looking at this really insightful article. It's titled, "The Passport in Your Mind, How a Rich Mindset Unlocks English Fluency for C1 Learners."
I read that one too.
And our mission really is to unpack this whole idea of rich versus poor mindsets.
Right.
And see how it directly impacts you if you're out there aiming for that, top tier of English proficiency.
And if we connect this to sort of the wider psychological research, we're essentially talking about growth and fixed mindsets.
Oh, yes, Carol Dweck's work.
Exactly, Dr. Carol Dweck. And these aren't just, abstract theories floating around. They have very real consequences for how we learn, definitely how we respond when things get difficult.
Right.
And ultimately, how much progress we actually make.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts then. This article lays out these two mindsets quite clearly. Let's start with what it calls the poor mindset, often called the fixed mindset. What are the core beliefs someone with this mindset is operating under?
Well, at its heart, a poor or fixed mindset really stems from the belief that our intelligence, our abilities, they're largely static, fixed.
Like you're born with it or you're not.
Pretty much, yeah. That we have a certain level of aptitude and that's kind of it. People leaning this way might think you either have a knack for languages or you don't.
Okay.
So challenges, they can feel quite threatening because struggling might expose what you perceive as a lack of that natural ability.
So you avoid them.
You tend to avoid them, yeah. And effort can seem a bit pointless unless you already have that gift.
Right. Why bother if I'm not naturally good at it?
Exactly. And feedback, even constructive feedback, can feel like a personal criticism, an attack.
Ouch.
And seeing others succeed easily, that can even feel, threatening. Like it highlights your own deficiencies. The focus tends to be on limitations, on this perceived scarcity of talent or opportunity.
Interesting. Okay, so how does this actually translate into the experience of a C1 English learner? What might we see them doing or not doing?
Well, okay, imagine a C1 learner with this poor mindset. They hit a plateau, which is common.
Very common.
They might conclude, right, that's it. I've reached my limit. This is as fluent as I'm ever going to get.
Giving up, essentially.
Or just accepting it, yeah. They might avoid tackling, say, really tricky pronunciation points or complex grammar.
Like certain phrasal verbs or subjunctive moods.
Exactly, thinking, I'll never really sound natural saying that. Or they might hesitate to speak in new situations, maybe a high-stakes meeting.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid mistakes will just reveal their underlying not good enoughness. And if a native speaker offers a correction, it doesn't feel helpful. It feels like confirmation. See, I knew I wasn't good enough.
Wow, that paints a picture.
And they might look at other learners who seem to be progressing faster or more easily and just feel envy. It's often rooted deep down in that fear of failure, avoiding anything where they might not look perfectly competent right away.
That sounds like a really significant roadblock to getting truly fluent. Okay, let's flip the coin. The rich mindset or the growth mindset.
Right.
What's the fundamental difference there? How do they see abilities?
The rich or growth mindset is really characterized by the belief that our abilities are not fixed. They can be developed, strengthened.
Through effort.
Through dedication, effort, hard work, learning. Yeah. Challenges, from this perspective, aren't threats to run away from.
Okay.
They're seen as valuable opportunities, chances to grow, to develop skills. Effort isn't pointless. It's the path to mastery.
So effort is key.
Absolutely. And feedback. It's not criticism. It's crucial information, something you actively seek out because it helps you improve.
Data for improvement.
Exactly. And when others succeed, it's not threatening. It's inspiring. You might think, wow, how did they do that? What can I learn? The focus shifts to possibilities, to the abundance of strategies, to the potential for growth.
Okay, so let's apply that lens again to our C1 learner. How does someone with this mindset approach their English learning?
Well, when this learner hits that same C1 plateau, they're much less likely to see it as a brick wall.
Right.
It's more like a signal. Okay, maybe my usual strategies aren't cutting it anymore. Time to change things up.
So what would they do?
They might think, what new approaches can I try? Should I, find different kinds of input, read different things, listen to different accents?
Diversify.
Diversify, yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe I need to tackle more challenging stuff, like really focus on refining my register for formal situations, or finally get to grips with those tricky collocations and idiomatic phrases.
So they line into the difficulty.
Exactly. That complex grammar point isn't something scary to avoid. It's a puzzle. How does this work? Let me figure it out.
Okay.
They're more likely to volunteer to speak, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable, because they see it as practice, a chance to get better, corrections. They're welcomed. Oh, thanks. How should I say it then? And if they hear someone with an amazing accent, the reaction isn't envy. It's more like curiosity.
How'd they get that good?
Yeah. What steps did they take? What can I learn from their approach? It's a totally different way of engaging with the whole learning process.
It really is. And you mentioned Dr. Carol Dweck again. Her research provides such a solid foundation for why this difference in mindset is so incredibly important, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, her work across many fields consistently shows that people with a growth mindset tend to achieve more over time.
Regardless of starting point.
Largely, yes, regardless of their initial baseline ability. And it's because they show more resilience when things get tough. They stay engaged in learning more actively. They persist longer when it's difficult.
And those are exactly the qualities you need for advanced English.
Crucial, especially when you're navigating those really subtle, complex aspects of fluency. Resilience, persistence, active learning. They're key.
Okay. Now, this article we're discussing specifically zooms in on the hurdles C1 learners often face. Let's talk about this plateau phenomenon. So many advanced learners hit this.
Oh, definitely. And what's really interesting is how differently the two mindsets interpret that same experience, that slowing down of progress.
Right.
Someone with that poor, fixed mindset might just see it as proof. Yep, told you, this is my limit.
The end of the road?
But someone with the rich growth mindset, they see it very differently. It's a signal.
A signal for what?
A signal that maybe the strategies that got them to C1 aren't the right ones to get them beyond C1.
Ah, okay. Time for a new approach.
Exactly. They might ask, okay, what new things can I try? What different kinds of input should I look for? Maybe I need to focus more on, the subtle stuff like register or using specific vocabulary for different situations. It's an opportunity to rethink and adjust their strategy.
That makes sense. And what about the fear of imperfection? That seems huge at C1, where you know enough to know what you don't know perfectly.
Precisely. At this level, you often have a really sophisticated grasp of English, but you become hyper-aware of those tiny differences between your usage and a native speaker's.
Yeah, the little things.
And for someone with a poor mindset, that awareness can just lead to avoidance. They might clam up or stick to safe sentences.
Avoid situations where they might be exposed.
Exactly. But with a rich mindset, those imperfections, they aren't failures. They're not shortcomings. They're data points.
Data points, how so?
They show you exactly where you can refine things further. Learners with this growth mindset, they might even seek out feedback on those subtle points. They want to know how to sound more natural, more precise. They see those mistakes as necessary steps on the way to real mastery.
That's a really powerful reframing. Viewing mistakes as data.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the article mentions comfort zone confinement. Sticking to what feels easy.
We all do it, don't we? Linguistically, too.
Yeah.
And at C1, you can communicate effectively about a lot of things, so the temptation to just stay there, it's really strong.
Why push harder if you're getting by?
Well, the poor mindset often leads to resistance when you face a chance to step outside that zone. It feels safe, familiar, even if it's holding back your growth. But the rich mindset, it actively seeks out unfamiliar territory. People with this mindset might deliberately pick up books in genres they don't normally read.
Challenge themselves with input.
Yeah, or try to talk with native speakers about complex topics they haven't discussed much in English before. They'll experiment with more sophisticated words or sentence structures, even if it feels a bit awkward at first.
Embracing the awkwardness.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they know that's where the growth happens.
And the final point here was the good enough trap. Reaching C1 and thinking, okay, Job done.
Absolutely. If your main reason for learning English was purely practical, say, for your job,
Yeah.
then hitting C1 might feel like you've crossed the finish line, especially if you have a poor mindset. You can function, you can do your work.
Yeah.
So the drive to keep improving might just fade.
Complacency sets in.
It can. But the rich mindset is often powered by something more intrinsic, a genuine interest, maybe even a love for the language itself. They're not satisfied with just being good enough. They want deeper understanding, more elegance, more precision. They want that richer connection with English-speaking cultures. For them, learning is an ongoing journey, not just getting to a destination.
These distinctions are so important. Okay, to really bring this home, the article shares some really great stories of actual English learners. Let's talk about Priya from Bangalore. She's an engineer.
That's right. Priya had strong technical English, definitely C1 level for her work, but in international meetings, she consistently felt anxious, hesitant.
What was she afraid of?
Deep down, it was this fear of making grammatical mistakes or being judged for her accent. It really held her back from contributing fully. That's a classic example of a poor mindset kicking in, even for someone highly skilled.
So what changed for her? How did she get past that?
Well, apparently a mentor gave her some really key advice. Basically, focus on clear communication, getting your ideas across, rather than aiming for absolute perfection.
Shift the goalpost.
Exactly. And that prompted Priya to start adopting more of a rich mindset. She began seeing those meetings not as tests, but as practice opportunities.
Okay.
She focused on just conveying her message clearly, not obsessing over every little potential error. She even started asking for feedback.
Really? Actively seeking it?
Yeah. And the result, her confidence shot up. She became way more engaged, a valued participant, and eventually she started leading international projects.
Wow.
Her big takeaway was that the willingness to learn, the willingness to contribute, that matters way more than worrying about tiny imperfections. It's that shift from performance, I must sound perfect, to learning I want to communicate effectively. Huge for advanced learners.
That's a fantastic example. Okay, next story. Javier, a tour guide from Medellin, Colombia. What was his mindset challenge?
So Javier was comfortably C1, great with the standard tourist chat,
Yeah, the usual topics.
But he felt really uncomfortable, kind of inadequate when visitors asked deeper questions. Colombian politics, economics, cultural stuff.
Things requiring more nuanced language.
Exactly. And his initial poor mindset was basically stick to what you know, don't go there.
So how did he break out of that?
He got inspired by a colleague, actually. This other guide wasn't perfect, English-wise, but wasn't afraid to tackle those complex conversations.
Seeing someone else do it.
Yeah, it sparked something. So Javier started actively seeking out those challenging chats with tourists. He started reading international news, listening to different podcasts, even joined a debate club.
Wow, he really went for it.
He did. And sure, it was tough. He made mistakes, but he saw every single one as a learning chance. And his English just transformed. He became a much more engaging, knowledgeable guide.
And I bet that showed up in his work.
Definitely. Better tips, more recognition. His takeaway was clear. Actively seek out those challenges, even if they feel uncomfortable. That's where the big growth happens.
It's great to hear how pushing through discomfort pays off. Okay, final story. Kenji, a retiree from Osaka, Japan. His dream was reading English literature.
Yeah, a lifelong dream. But he was maybe a rusty B2 pushing C1, and his poor mindset had him convinced, I'm too old. It's too late to get good enough for complex novels.
And that's a common belief, sadly.
It is. He'd try reading, but get discouraged really quickly by all the unknown words, the difficulty.
So what turned it around for Kenji?
He saw someone else in a book club he went to, an American guy learning Japanese.
Okay.
And this guy, this fellow retiree, he just celebrated every little win in his Japanese. Didn't let mistakes stop him. Just enjoy the process.
Demonstrating the rich mindset.
Exactly. It was like a light bulb moment for Kenji. So he started applying that to his English reading. He began with simpler classics, celebrated finishing each chapter,
Small wins.
focused on the joy of the story, not perfect understanding right away. He gave himself permission to read slowly, look things up, without feeling like a failure. The process became the reward.
And the outcome.
Now, he's an avid reader of English lit. He even writes little reviews in English. His story just shows beautifully, doesn't it? That rich mindset works at any age. It's about embracing the journey, enjoying the process, celebrating progress.
These stories really hit home. It shows this isn't just theory. Mindset really impacts progress, regardless of age or background. So, Okay, for a C1 learner listening right now, feeling maybe a bit stuck, what are some concrete things they can do to cultivate this rich mindset? The article had some great tips.
It did. And the first, absolutely crucial step is to start consciously reframing that inner dialogue. You know, that voice inside your head.
The inner critic.
Sometimes, yeah. If it's constantly saying, oh, I'm just not good at this, or I'll never get the hang of this conditional tense, that's the poor mindset talking.
Right.
The trick is to catch it, challenge it, and reframe it. So instead of this grammar is too hard, try thinking, okay, this grammar is challenging. What specific part is confusing me? What resources could help break it down?
Be specific and solution focused.
Exactly. Some people find keeping a mindset journal really helps. Write down the negative thought, then consciously rewrite it from a growth perspective. It takes practice, but it works.
I like that. Actively rewriting the script in your head. Okay, what's another key strategy?
Embracing imperfection. This is huge at C1, where, like we said, you're aware of your errors.
Instead of hiding them.
Exactly. Instead of avoiding mistakes, see them as gold mines, learning opportunities. Actively ask for feedback on those tricky, nuanced bits you're unsure about.
Be brave enough to ask.
Yeah. And when you do make a mistake, don't just brush it off and feel bad. Analyze it. Why did it happen? What's the correct way? How can I practice that?
Turn it into a mini lesson.
Precisely. Someone mentioned keeping a favorite mistakes list, kind of reframes errors as evidence you're trying, you're learning. And for speaking, record yourself. Then listen back objectively. Not to beat yourself up, but to spot specific things to work on. It can be incredibly insightful.
The favorite mistakes list, I love that. Shifting shame to learning. Okay, what's next for building that rich mindset?
Focus on setting process-oriented goals, not just outcome ones.
What's the difference?
Well, an outcome goal is like become fluent or sound like a native. Very vague, hard to measure, often out of your direct control.
Right.
A process goal is about the actions you take. Specific, actionable things related to learning, like this week, I will learn and try to use 5 new idioms in conversation.
Okay, something concrete.
Or I'll watch 30 minutes of a British TV show without subtitles and focus on understanding the conversational nuances. Then, and this is key, celebrate completing those process goals. Celebrate the small wins.
Like finishing a tough chapter.
Finishing a chapter, having a successful conversation about a complex topic, finally understanding that tricky grammar point. It keeps you focused on your effort and strategies, which are in your control.
That makes so much sense. Focus on the journey, the steps, not just the distant destination. Okay, what about pushing boundaries, the comfort zone?
Crucial. Absolutely vital for C1 growth. It's so easy to get comfy, but progress happens at the edges.
So how do you do that deliberately?
Make a conscious effort. Read widely. Read deeply. Don't just stick to news articles you find easy. Try academic papers, literature, poetry, your specialized blogs on topics that stretch you.
Vary the input.
And vary the output. Seek out diverse conversation partners. Engage in discussions on complex, maybe even controversial topics. Experiment. Try using more sophisticated vocabulary or grammar, even if it feels a bit clunky at first.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
A little bit, yeah. A useful trick is the +1 rule. Always try to push yourself just one small step beyond what feels totally easy and comfortable in your English use.
I like that. +1. Okay, what else fosters a rich mindset?
Cultivating a genuine curiosity, even love for the language itself. Go beyond just seeing it as a tool.
Ow.
Explore word origins. Etymology can be fascinating. Play with language puns, wordplay. Immerse yourself in the culture behind the language films, music, books, and pay attention to the context, the nuance.
Find the fun in it.
Yes. Find your English passion project, something that really excites you and involves using English actively, maybe translating poems you love, starting a blog in English about your hobby, mastering the lyrics of a complex song. When learning feels less like a chore and more like exploration, it's way more sustainable.
That reminds me of Kenji and his literature, Finding the Joy. Okay, another way.
Learn from others, but try hard not to fall into negative comparisons.
The comparison trap. Their English is so much better than mine.
Exactly. That's the poor mindset speaking. The rich mindset sees someone with impressive English and thinks, wow, that's great. What can I learn from them? What strategies did they use?
Be inspired, not intimidated.
Precisely. Ask for tips. Find language role models, people whose skills you admire, and analyze what they do well. Maybe read interviews about their learning journey if you can find them. It's much more constructive.
Definitely a healthier approach. Okay, and what's a final piece of advice here for nurturing this mindset?
Practice self-compassion and patience consistently. Getting to advanced fluency is a marathon, remember, not a sprint.
It takes time.
A lot of time and effort. There will be setbacks, frustrating days, moments where you doubt yourself. It's normal.
So be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself during those times. Acknowledge that it's difficult. Allow yourself a break if you need it. But then gently recommit to your goals. And something that really helps maintain perspective and motivation. Regularly remind yourself how far you've already come.
Look back at your progress.
Yeah. Acknowledge the journey you've already made. It fuels you for the road ahead.
These are all such practical, valuable tips. The article even had this little comparison. 2 fictional learners, Sarah with the fixed mindset, Tom with the growth one.
Right, Sarah and Tom.
And it was striking how Tom, not because he was necessarily more talented, just consistently progressed faster. All because of how he approached challenges, his belief he could improve.
And that really hammers home the core message, doesn't it? The engine of advancement, especially at this C1 level, is so often your mindset. Getting to C1 is huge, but pushing beyond it, that needs a fundamental belief in your capacity to keep growing.
Yeah.
The article really drove that home, contrasting the poor mindset, avoiding challenges, giving up, thinking effort is pointless.
Seeing feedback as criticism.
Right, versus the rich mindset, embracing challenges, persisting, seeing effort as the way to mastery, learning from feedback.
Being inspired by others.
Exactly, all those characteristics.
And it circled back to those specific C1 challenges we talked about, the plateau, the nuance, activating vocabulary, fear of mistakes, keeping motivated. And it showed how the poor mindset just makes those things worse with negative self-talk, whereas the rich mindset finds solutions and growth within those same challenges.
Precisely, and weaving those stories back in, like maybe Anya, using mistakes to break a speaking plateau, or Kenji finding joy despite his doubts.
Yeah, reinforcing the real-world impact.
These examples just really emphasize that shifting your mindset isn't just some vague, nice idea. It's a concrete strategy. It's what led to real breakthroughs for these learners facing things you might be facing. It shows the specific actions, the internal shifts, that made the difference.
Absolutely. And it's worth just quickly recapping those actionable tips, maybe slightly rephrased because they're so key.
Go for it.
Reframe challenges using yet, I don't understand this yet. Embrace intelligent mistakes, learn from them, maybe keep that mistake journal, set specific process-focused goals, actively seek out and value constructive feedback, celebrate your effort and those small, concrete wins, view other success as a learning opportunity, not a threat. Keep pushing your comfort zone, that +1 idea, focus on the long journey, practice self-compassion when you stumble, and surround yourself with growth-minded people or resources.
That's a great summary. It's a practical toolkit, really, for anyone feeling stuck or discouraged at C1. And ultimately, as the article concludes so well, your English future. It's not just about study hours. It's hugely influenced by the mindset you bring to those hours.
That barrier, is it really a barrier or is it a gateway if you approach it differently?
Exactly. That mistake, is it proof of failure or is it a lesson? Your ability, is it fixed forever or is it something you can mold and grow?
It's a choice in perspective.
It really is. And cultivating that rich mindset, that's an investment that pays off way beyond just English. It builds resilience, enhances learning in general, helps you achieve more across the board. Think about Priya, Javier, Kenji. Their stories show that transformation is possible. Really, the most valuable passport you have on this journey isn't just your vocabulary list. It's your resilience, your curiosity, your belief in your own potential. Open your mind, embrace the process, the challenges, and you'll be amazed at the transformation. The key isn't just what you learn, it's how you think about learning. Choose the rich mindset.
Wow. So the core message from this deep dive seems crystal clear. For those of you really pushing for fluency, C1 and beyond, your mindset, it's just as critical as your grammar knowledge or your vocabulary bank.
Absolutely. Understanding that difference between fixed poor and growth rich, and then actively working to cultivate that growth mindset, that can be the very thing that breaks you through those plateaus and unlocks your full potential.
So as you're listening, maybe take a moment to reflect. Where in your English learning journey could a shift in mindset make the biggest difference right now?
Yeah, are there specific challenges you tend to avoid? Setbacks that have really knocked your confidence? Just identifying those areas is a really powerful first step.
And maybe to leave you with a final thought to chew on. What's one specific part of your English learning, maybe speaking anxiety, maybe complex reading, maybe pronunciation, that you feel could be most transformed by adopting a richer mindset? And following on from that, what's just one small concrete action you could take, maybe even today, to start cultivating that growth?
Could be as simple as reframing one negative thought. or deciding to ask for specific feedback tomorrow, or setting one small process goal for the week.
It's a must.
Small steps add up.
Yeah.
And we really encourage you, if this resonates, look into Dr. Carol Dweck's work more. Reflect on the stories we shared, Priya, Javier, Kenji. How do their experiences maybe mirror your own? Engaging with these ideas, being honest with yourself about your approach, it can be incredibly empowering.
Ultimately, just remember that you absolutely do have the ability to keep growing your English skills, and the power of your own mind, your mindset, is probably your most valuable tool on that journey. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.